Welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast, where you are invited to taste and see that the Lord is good. Gospel Spice is your Christ-centered podcast infused with in-depth biblical flavors and sprinkled with a dash of French culture, guaranteed to spice up your relationship with God. I'm your host, Stephanie Roussel, and here is today's episode. Hannah Brencher, welcome on the Gospel Spice podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. This is fun because I've loved your book, The Unplugged Hours. I love your vulnerability in tracing your journey to reconnect with God, with yourself, with your family, by letting go of your phone and all sorts of devices. Before we get to the book, which I have so many questions about and so many insights I think are going to help me, help everyone listening and watching grow in their faith. Tell us about you. What led you to a place where, well, you got a little too much on your phone?
Yeah, so my name is Hannah. If we have not met yet, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been here for about 11 years, been married to my husband, Lane, for almost 10 years, and we have a little girl named Novalee. I'm a writer and an author. I love words more than anything. They're my passion. And I also love teaching people. This came through my own walk with depression and mental illness. Out of that came this love for self-discipline and for habits and better rhythms and routines that lead to an abundant, intentional life. And so I would say that was definitely one of the ways in which I got to this place of needing to unplug. I think, if I go back to the beginning of the story, it was during COVID where a lot of us were on our phones, and it was because that was how we were coping. That was the way that we could stay connected to people. But I'm sure I'm not the only one that was like, I thought this was going to last 2 weeks, and then it ended up lasting many years. So it was about a year into the pandemic that I looked around my life and I realized, like, whoa, like I had a soul check of like, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, and I can trace it all back to this device, like this constant connectivity that I've become okay with that is now making me feel tattered and all over the place. And I don't think I specifically had a plan to unplug, but in one of my quiet times on my birthday, I was sitting there and I was trying to come up with, because I'm like a project person. And so I was sitting there and trying to figure out like what would this next year ahead be? And I remember hearing so clearly in my spirit, which I now believe was the Holy Spirit, just said, turn off your phone. And I knew in that moment, like that was it. That was the most important thing that I was going to do this year. And it wasn't going to be a one-time thing. It was going to be a journey of turning off my phone. I just didn't realize how fully this was going to change my life in such a drastic way.
That makes so much sense. And I think at this point, we've all heard that, like we are all too much on our phones.
Yeah.
But it's one of those intangible things that we all know, but really, I mean, realistically, we're not really doing. We all think we should probably be less on our phones, but then it's so convenient. It's just right there. It's kind of glued to our hands. What are the symptoms that you would describe were yours, or someone watching, listening who's like, well, I don't actually have a problem with my phone. If you don't have a problem with your phone, that's awesome. I want to spend more time with you. But what are some of the symptoms that, or maybe help me understand what could be the symptoms to red flag that I might be too much on my phone? What does it feel like?
Yeah, so I felt like this need to always be on. Like I could never shut off, I could never power down, especially in the midst of COVID, but like, beyond COVID,
Right, like today,
yeah,
in
today
2025, what would it look like?
we're still being bombarded with news stories. The algorithm, as much as it feeds to like our desires and our wants, it also feeds to our fears and what we're afraid of. And it uses it as a way to keep us on our phones more. And so I felt like I was always plugged in, but then I also felt this like false sense of control. Like if I can just consume enough information, then maybe maybe I don't need God as much as I thought I did, or maybe I can be more in control of the situation. Another thing that I found myself doing was I just was becoming more apathetic, which was never a description that I would have used to describe myself, but like it was almost like the more I was on my device, the less I could care for the people in my life that actually needed my care or my concern or needed me to reach out because I was just tired or I felt numb. Another thing that I noticed was just as a new mom, I would find myself consistently just reaching for my phone out of habit. And then I would like be holding it like, what am I even doing with my phone? What was I looking up? Like I felt very scattered. My attention felt very scattered. And then I would just say over all of that was just this level of what I would call burnout, especially as a writer and as a creative. I didn't feel like creating anymore. I felt tired. I felt like everything around me was a rat race and I had to keep up with it. And that was when I was like, something has to give. Like, this cannot be the way forward.
Oh, what you're describing is so, anxiety causing just listening to you. And also, I can so relate to that. The anxiety, the exhaustion, the stress, the
Mm.
FOMO, like the constant thinking, well, what's going to happen if I don't look at my phone today and I might miss out on something big? Or you describe purpose anxiety in your book. And I loved
Mm.
that because how is that so symptomatic of our generation, broadly speaking?
I think that it was, and I don't have like all the full research on this, but in the things that I've read and consumed, like I do think that like our world changed after 9/11. I think after 9/11, that was like a very big like shift in the American culture. And all of a sudden, it was like this need to like go after your dreams, make your life matter. And all of that's important and beautiful. And that's something we talk a lot about within the Christian faith. But I also think that it can lead us to this space where we're always thinking that the thing that we need is elsewhere, right? Like the dream is elsewhere, the calling is elsewhere. And then amplify that by 100 with our phones because our phones are always convincing us that like the product we need is right over here. The planner we need is right over here. The diet we need is right over here. It's always within a distance, but it's never right in front of us. And I think that what I've learned, especially through unplugging, is that like, no, like the richness and the goodness comes from rooting deep in the present moment. It's not always comfortable. Like it's definitely a learning curve, but like God wants us to be right here and he wants us to be present in today with him. And then when you start to do that more and more, you start to look around and realize like, no, the dream isn't elsewhere. Like the life that I want to live on purpose is right here and nothing is actually stopping me from living that life.
That's right. What I'm hearing you say is that when I look at past generations, I consume a massive amount of old books, and
Mhm.
I say often that a lot of my best friends have been dead for centuries, which
I
is
love that.
kind
Me
of
too.
weird. But like really, there's so much wisdom, and also the realizing that actually some of the struggles we face today are not new. They were faced, by
Yeah.
generations past in different ways. But what I'm hearing you say is that this need to have a purpose, a reason to be alive, well, that's very human, and every single human lives with that. But the way when we project ourselves into the future, the next thing that's going to bring us this happiness, this fulfillment, we're projecting ourselves into the future in time, which isn't healthy because we're meant to live in the
Mhm.
present moment. But what social media does in particular, and our phones in general, is that it doesn't allow us to anchor ourselves in space either, right? So we've
Absolutely.
been removed both from time and the present by living in the future, but also from space because we're not where we are when we're on our phones. We're not
Yeah.
physically present to our surroundings when we are, on that little black box. And so we're removed from space and time. And of course, that's anxiety causing because God has placed us in time and space. And
Yeah.
when we remove ourselves from that, we're in big trouble. One of those solutions you describe, and I just melted with relatability and joy when I read that in your book, is you focus on the importance of contentment.
Yeah.
Contentment grounds us in time and space. Help us unpack how contentment has drawn you closer to God as you've looked for contentment outside of your phone.
Yeah, because I feel like if we are on our phones, like, right, then contentment is it's a big struggle when we're constantly connected. Because not only are you seeing the things that you don't have, you're also seeing like people that you will measure yourself against, you know? It's all part of like a mindset. And so one of the things that I discovered while writing the book that I just like loved was I write about it earlier in the contentment chapter about how Paul talks about contentment, but how he says, like, I have learned the secret of being content. And that was something that had never stuck out to me. I just wanted to get to the contentment part, but I didn't realize that he had said, I've learned it, like, meaning like it took time. It's a process. Like I say, contentment is like a dance. And the second you get comfortable with the dance, a new move is going to be introduced into it. And so, gosh, it's hard. I'm still over here unplugging and still some days will struggle with contentment. But something that I've been doing lately, I call it grounding, but it's not the grounding that you think about. Like I'm not over standing in the grass, though I hear there's amazing benefits to that. But I've been calling it grounding because what I'll do is if I'm reading a book or I'm going about my day or I'm in my quiet time, like there will just be these moments throughout the day that I will just stop and wherever I am or whatever notebook is near me, I'll just write down the details of what is happening around me in that moment. It's my way of dropping down into the present moment and remembering it. And like, I don't have a specific journal that I do this practice. I have not made it like an official thing. It's just that all throughout, like I can look at my Bible or my prayer journal and I can see these little snippets of like, this what was happening in the present moment and it was enough. And so that's where I say I think it's a practice. I think that at the beginning of it, if you are just like in a place of discontentment, it's really hard to detox from that. It's really hard to put away your phone and say, you know what? Like tell yourself the truth. Like I'm enough. I don't need more. Like I have everything that I need. God is meeting and supplying my every need. Like that is a script rewrite that's really hard, but the more that I've practiced it, the more that I've actually believed it. And I'll go through times like the Amazon Prime sale that just happened and telling myself, nope, we have everything we need. Nothing within that sale is going to complete you. And so it's almost like talking better to yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of humility there. And I think that's actually the key to contentment because we only desire to learn, contentment included, when we have a posture of curiosity and humility,
Love
right?
that.
As opposed to saying, I get this, I can control this. And those of us, and it sounds like, unfortunately, you share my bent of being a bit of a control freak. I'm sorry about that. I can relate to it. I'm so sorry.
Totally, totally. I admit it for
But
sure.
we need, right? We need to learn the humility of not being in control. And ultimately, going from looking to ourselves but really looking to the Lord for that place of being a student, of learning. Okay, when you say that you're taking, I love what you're saying, taking little snippets of the moment and writing a little note. How is that different from pulling out my phone and trying to capture a moment for posterity or for social media? How is that not the same thing? Because it really isn't, right? One keeps us plugged in, the other keeps us plugged out. Help me understand the difference.
Totally. I don't think so. Like, I'm not anti-phone. I'm not like proposing that we all go live like in a commune in the woods.
That
Though
sounds
some
lovely,
days
but I
that
don't think
sounds
it's
great.
practical.
No. And that was, yeah, what you just said though, that was the heart of why I really wanted to dig in and do this challenge was because I wanted to know, is there a practical way to do this? Is there a way that I can do the work that I have to do on my phone, but also know when enough is enough? And so it's one of those things I actually call it in my own life, I call it slow documentation. So it's not the most efficient form. It's not on my notes app. Um, I think there's nothing wrong with snapping a photo, but I also feel like a lot of times we snap a photo and then we check our email and then we check our socials and then we're like, wait a minute, I've been pulled completely from the moment at hand. And so for me, it's kind of like a handwritten photograph. if you will, that doesn't pull me from the moment where I am. Because a lot of those moments for me are happening with my daughter. You know, my daughter's playing with her magnet tiles right beside me. Like this was just one of the ones the other day. We were playing a Christmas record. Why? I don't know. Probably because it's so hot in Georgia right now. And she was playing with her magnet tiles, and I was doing a little extra quiet time, and I had a cup of peppermint tea, and it was like everything around me just felt like this is peace, this is joy. And so it's not to say that I couldn't have perfectly curated a photo and snapped it, but I'll be honest, like I don't feel like I go back to those photos on my phone often and look at them to be like, oh, I remember that moment. A lot of times I'm taking those photos because I want to share that moment with other people. And I think that's the key right there is that when I first started unplugging, I did not know how to look at the moments in my life and say, this is enough. This is enough for me. If no one ever finds out that I did this, this is enough for me. And that was a real problem. Like, that's a problem if you look at your life and it only means something to you if you share it with other people. And so, yeah, it's different than taking a picture on your phone. To me, it's just, it's sweeter and it's slower. And me 10 years ago, never would have never wanted to take the back roads, would have never wanted to go with the slower option. But me now, as I grow in my faith and I grow in my unplugging journey, I'm like, wait a minute, like this is where the good stuff is. Like this is where it lives.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm all in favor, absolutely, about the slower life. Let's talk about the toxicity of a mindset of productivity for a minute there, and
Mm.
how that is really a faith killer.
Yeah, I didn't know that for a really long time.
Mhm.
And it's funny. So there was in the midst of my year of unplugging, because I think I th moved into this and thought I'm gonna be an expert by the end of this, right? Like I'm gonna go through this year, I will have learned what I needed to learn, and I had no idea that like that 1,000 hours that I did at the beginning was just that was literally the foundation for
Mhm.
what I'm living now, the lifestyle that I'm living now. And so the productive part of me at the beginning of this created a challenge because that was how I knew how to measure things. And then slowly those pieces of me started falling off and it was really, I mean, it almost felt like a grieving process because I saw my identity in these things, in getting things done, in crushing my goals, in people saying to me like, I don't know how you do it all. Like that was fuel for me. And then a couple hundred hours into the unplugging process, we went through a season where our daughter was sick and we did not know what was wrong with her. We were going in and out of the hospital. We could not get answers. We were meeting with so many doctors. And it like set our lives onto high alert. And all of a sudden, all the plans that I had laid out for each day, like some days you would wake up and you would say, and all the plans are out the window. And we just have to live this day hour by hour. And I think in my quiet time with God, He really started to like dig into this with me and started to dismantle this definition of productivity that I had held to such a high esteem because I realized, okay, if I associate productivity with my worth and my value, what happens when I'm not getting things done? Am I worthy and am I valuable? And that was a really, really hard thing for me to accept because I wanted to perform for God. I wanted to be God's little soldier. I wanted to get the things done, and that gave me worth and value. But like what God was trying to show me was like, no, I already give you worth and value. It doesn't come from what you do. But at the same time, in the moments when you think that you're not actually being productive, what if that means that something is being produced in you? That like future you is going to be a different version of yourself because you learned patience or you learned peace or you learned to stay steady in a hard time. And so that I think is the hope is that like even if you're going through a season right now where you feel really unseen or you feel like nothing is really moving forward, like there's probably something happening beneath the surface. And it's actually very productive work if we reframe that definition of productivity.
Exactly, exactly. I completely agree. I call what you're describing the curse of the capable woman. Those of us, or man for that matter, those of us that God has allowed and made us to be able to be very productive, we do tend to draw our identity from it. And so he's
Mhm.
teaching us to not do that, especially when you layer on top of that this need we have for approval. And all of a sudden, productivity isn't its own thing, but it's only viewed as good productivity when it's been approved by others. So you're looking for the validation of others. And now you're in
Yep.
this perfect storm of productivity and needing approval. And that takes you just so totally away from God and away from faith. I have found so what you're describing, I went through something very similar in my 30s. So I completely understand. I think it's God's gentleness in allowing us to go our way for a little bit so that then he shows us a better way, right? um
Yeah.
I think I remember for me, what was difficult was to learn um, to see or define failure differently and also success differently. So I'd love your
Mm.
thoughts on that, because for me, like as I, mused over the decades on what is success, what is true success spiritually speaking,
Mm.
I've come to the conclusion that, at least for me, and I don't think that's necessarily for everyone, but for me, a successful life is a succession of days and moments and hours where I'm delighting in God. I'm
Mm.
aware of his presence and I delight in his presence because I know that he delights in me.
Yeah, that's
That
so
has
good.
been key. But I'd love to hear for you, how would you define success now as opposed to maybe 10 years ago? Help us
Yeah.
cast a vision for that.
Yeah, so I think I learned a lot of that, like, because after I did the unplugging for a year, and I was like, this is something I'm going to continue to keep doing, and something that I still do today because it's so important to me. But I think I learned a lot about this, like, in the actual writing of the book and then the marketing of the book, because I think that that especially is like a time where success is a really important thing. Like, will I write a good book? Will the book sell? All of these metrics. And so that was the space I was in. For somebody listening, it's something different, but we all have these metrics of what success looks like. And God kept drawing me back to the story, and I can't remember specifically which gospel it's in. It might be in multiple. But it's the point where Jesus is saying to the disciples, like, like, don't go out into the streets and like make a big show of things. Like, when you pray, close your door, get away from the world. But there's this line that he says about the people that are out in the streets making a show of things. He says, for they will have their reward, but you will get a different reward. And that really struck me of like, wait a minute, I never noticed that like the people that are out in the streets, the people that like need the praise and approval of other people, they get a reward in some ways. Like that dopamine hit from like everybody applauding you and cheering you on and thinking you're successful is a reward, but it's a reward that doesn't last because you're always going to need the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And God kept reminding me of that, of like, that's not the reward you're seeking. The reward is me. I'm already the reward. You have the reward. And that was honestly like a very hard mindset for me to shift because every part of me wants to say, no, the reward is in what I do. The reward is in how this sells. The reward is in what people say about it. And I had to keep bringing myself back to center to say, no, God is the reward. And when I stay in that space, when I believe that truth, it's like everything around me is like so much more peaceful, so much more relaxed. Like there's not this urgency that I think comes with like success and keeping up and always on to the next thing. And like, I do think that that's part of the reward of like slowing down and delighting in God. And instead of saying, like, okay, what's the successful point of my career for the next year? It's like, no, where is success in this day, in this moment? Where did I do it well? Where do I say, good job, good and faithful servant? And like staying in today rather than always looking for that next benchmark.
Oh, so good. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Genesis 15:1, God promises Abraham, he tells Abraham, I am your very great reward.
Mm, yeah.
God says that, like, I'm going to give you nations upon nations and wealth and descendants and fame and fortune, all the
Yeah.
all the definitions of success. And then he goes, I'm going to give you all of that, but I am your great reward. I
Mm,
love that because yes, like God says, I mean, if God is the ultimate in all good things,
yeah.
perfection and beauty and goodness and all those things, then when he gives himself to us, he gives us the best possible that there is. Nothing is
Yeah.
better than the best in beauty, in perfection, and in holiness, in kindness, in gentleness, and he gives that to us.
Well,
That's
and I
just
think
mind-boggling.
Yeah, I think that like especially within the Christian faith, we can get that confused and distorted. I think that we talk a lot about like wanting to be sent out, wanting to be on mission, wanting to live in our calling, like we reference that scripture in Isaiah all the time of like, here I am, Lord, send me. And
Isaiah 6
Moses
4.
said the
Yeah.
same
Mm-hmm.
thing, and so did Abraham. And what's interesting over the last few months, I dug into that statement that here I am, Lord, and it comes from this Hebrew word hineni,
Hanani. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
hineni, and it literally means like I'm ready and I'm available, God. And I think we get so caught up in the wanting to be sent part, in like the wanting to go part, that a lot of times we don't set our lives up to be ready and available to what God has for us. And I've found that in stillness and in quiet and in unplugging. Like even just this morning, I just sat before God once I finished reading my Bible, and I just it helped me map my day out, right? And like line by line, I wrote down the things that I thought needed to get done, but then also these things that like if they didn't get done, nobody would be any bit wiser, and yet they feel really important and they feel weighty. And like that to me is that readiness and that availability to say, God, I have my plans, but like your plans are better and bigger. So I want to make the space and be available for that. And that's the difference, I think, with unplugging is that you open yourself up to true availability with God rather than just accessibility. Accessibility of like, I'm here I am. If you need me, like I'm ready. But it's like, no, like I'm just going to make space, God. And then I know that you're going to move.
hmm And I find that God is sometimes agonizingly slow in the way he
Yeah,
moves,
he
right?
is.
He's
Yep.
rarely on my timeline. And
Hmm.
I love what you just said because I think, and not being an American, I always bump up against this American ideal of productivity, success, needing
Yeah.
to do big things to be validated and important. And I get that. That's the human heart. I have that inside of me too. But the American emphasis, like I find it's so difficult for American Christians because of this cultural overwhelm of the need, even in Christian circles, to do big things. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I remember there's a song, it was never big or anything, but it became a bit of a, like, it's important to me, and it's called Dream Small.
Hmm.
So it's not about having big dreams. It's actually about having little dreams of dailiness, of
Yeah.
setting before the Lord. It's not about just the big things we'll do in life because the big things are usually an accumulation of little things. So to
Yeah.
dream
Yep.
small, today, your dream is to spend time with your daughter, is to have a
Yeah.
meal with her, is maybe to go on a walk, to have a prayer life. These can seem small, but they're actually really, really big. What they give us, and I want to hear more about that because you write so beautifully about that in the book, they give us the presence of God.
Mm.
So tell us more about how his presence has morphed in your experience of unplugging.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think to that point that you just made too, it's like that's been a lesson I've learned along the way. It's like all the big things really are just a lot of small things on repeat. And if you stay faithful to those small things, I think like that's where you turn the keys over to God to be like, here, like you can steer the big thing. I am gonna stay faithful. You can steer the ship. I'll stay faithful to what needs to happen on the ship to keep it moving, right?
On a good
Um,
day. Yeah.
on a good
And I
day.
fail
Yes.
sometimes, and that's okay too.
Yes, absolutely. But like I think it's like one of those things where it's like we want the big things, but we don't want to actually like swab the deck or whatever it is, because we don't feel seen in those things. And I'm like, no, God is right there in those things. It's like the book that I reference in the Unplugged Hours, The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother
One of my
Lawrence.
favorite. He was French. He
Oh,
was a French monk in Paris. So yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
yes. Oh my gosh. And like him realizing like I can give glory to God in washing the dishes is like, oh my gosh, it's like right here. It's in the present moment. And that has been like a very hard discipline to learn. And I do think it comes with like what we've been talking about. It's like being willing to slow down. It's not about checking this thing off the list. It's not about finishing within the set timer, though I do love a timer every once in a while. But it's more about like how can I be rooted and grounded in this moment so that I can feel the presence of God in this moment. And one of the reasons that I like choose to just tuck my phone away and not have it when I'm doing this deep work or when I'm with my daughter or I'm cooking a meal is because I feel like if I can turn off the voices and the noise over here, I more readily will hear God speak. I will hear the nudges of like who I'm supposed to reach out to or who I'm supposed to show up for or what's coming up next. I feel like God is always telling me like, hey, we're taking this day hour by hour. So what does that next hour hold? And the days that I follow those instructions are so much fuller and sweeter and even longer than the days when I'm just like frantically running around feeling like I have to get everything done, you know? Because I don't feel like it's not that God is not in those things, but I feel like God is consistently reminding us like, hey, there's a different pace. Like there's a pace that you can follow and you will still these things will still happen. But like I move slower and you're allowed to move slower too. It's not because everybody around you is hustling that you have to continue to live by those voices or live by that standard. And so I've slowed so much of my life down, but I'm also surprised to say like I think I get more done now than I ever did when I was like frantically multitasking. Like and I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm like, at least I feel like going through it and doing it present is actually so much better than doing it distracted or frazzled.
So good. There's so many ways to think about that. I think it's what you're saying is it's better to create maybe 1 ounce of gold than a mountain of hay, right?
Yes,
That's going to burn
absolutely.
and not last. And volume wise, it looks like, a mountain of hay is way more productive than a tiny little bit of gold, but it isn't. And then at the same time, like we were talking about FOMO early on, I think what you're describing is that actually this fear of missing out by and being always plugged in actually is how we actually miss out. And so being more
Yep.
present and more aware of the rhythms of the day and what's going on around us is how we actually don't miss out. So
Yeah.
the fear, using our phones because we're afraid to miss out is actually how we miss out. So
Mhm.
which is such a diabolical scheme. It's so much of the
Yeah.
devil, right? To give us the very fear and then actually
Yeah.
have us live it and not realize it versus becoming more aware of our days. So are we more productive when we slow down? I don't know either, but God gives us the awareness of what we're actually accomplishing. So that's a
Mm.
big difference, right? I become
Yes.
more aware of what God is doing in and through me as opposed to rushing through and not even realizing it and feeling so empty and drained at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Jesus, Jesus never hurried and yet he
No.
accomplished every single thing that his father had given him to do. And we never see him seeking more. We always see him retreating in silence in his father's presence.
Yeah.
So if the very Son of God, who never lost intimacy with his Father until the cross, needs that, how much more
How much
little
more do
us,
we need it? Yeah.
right? And he didn't have an iPhone. Like I'd be so curious to see how, he would have navigated that. That's just really interesting. Okay, Hannah, you need to tell us about vegetables.
Yeah.
It's a chapter in your book. I loved it. Tell us about vegetables.
Yeah, it was I think it was right at the tail end of our daughter and all that sickness and everything and like we had finally gotten to a space of like just like not I wouldn't even say peace, just at the point, that you sometimes hit in life where like nothing is rocking around me. So let's
Yeah, can I interrupt you, ask you how
yeah.
she's doing now? Because in the book, you don't really give resolution. And I've just
Yeah.
been anxious for your daughter.
No, she's doing good. It's still, it's an ongoing touch and base, but there's never been like an official diagnosis, but it is not at all like it was before. And so yeah, we were very thankful. And I
Yeah,
had to,
yeah,
that was another thing that I had to just let go of was like I might never get answers
yeah.
for
Oh,
this season and why we walked through it, but it taught us a lot and she is healthy today.
yeah.
So,
Every time you would mention her, I would just stop and pray for her. It's like, okay, Lord, I
oh,
don't know where she's at right now, but my heart breaks for this little girl and for her mama who's going through
thank
so much.
you.
So
Thank you so
thank you for that.
much.
Okay, vegetables.
Yeah, so we were at a New Year's celebration and like me and my friend Lauren, something that we do every year is like we pick a word that we want to be our word for the year. And I remember we were sitting around the table and I'm like, this has been a really hard year. And I think I can't remember, you might remember it. I don't remember what was the word that I had even chosen for that year. Um, I think it was
Prepare? Something about
prepared,
preparing?
prepared,
Yeah.
yes. That had been my year, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to pick a hard word. I don't want to pick anything that could remotely get twisted or like
The
nothing
word
that
that
could,
terrifies me is words like patience. That's a
yes, yeah,
terrifying word
never.
because
Mm-mm.
that's going to be a hard one.
Like I'm like you're pretty safe if you choose like fun, or like color or something, So that year, like we were sitting around, everybody saying their words, and I literally at that moment, my friend had made these amazing green beans, and they were so good, and they were like the best green beans that I'd ever had, and I was so transfixed on them that I was like, you know what, like. I don't even know. I want my word for the year to be vegetable. That sounds like a great word for the year because I'm gonna learn to cook some vegetables, and that's it. That's it. It's
It
not gonna be
doesn't
deep.
sound very threatening.
No. What could go wrong if you just learn to make some vegetables? And my friend Lauren, of course, like she assigned meaning to it to be like, yeah, vegetables, they like grow in the dirt, they take time, like all this stuff, which is true. Like it led me into that following year of continuing to unplug and continuing to realize that like the best things in life take time and they take preparation and like it's not instant. Like there's nothing about getting a raw vegetable from the store that's like instant. It's also not the thing that like until you reset your palate, you're going to be craving, right? Like you want the drive-through, you want the chicken nuggets. And so to me, like that word really like it taught me so much in conjunction with unplugging about just like slow simmering and like waiting and patience and even learning the process like that. I didn't know how to cook a vegetable, and so one by one, I'd pick a new vegetable and I would find a way to make it. But it's so funny because those were the meals that are always the most satisfying to me because there was effort and energy that went into it.
So good. Okay, question for you. Since this is the Gospel Spice podcast, what's some of your
Yeah.
favorite spices to cook with? And please do like Lauren did with your word vegetable. Tell us what that can tell us about God. Go
Well,
theological
okay.
on me for a second with spices.
I, I mean, I'm not gonna claim that I'm a very good cook. So like I have never gotten to the point where I can just impromptu use spices. I'm gonna be honest with that. That is my husband all day, every day. I am somebody who is like, it's a miracle that I'm following a recipe right now. Because before all this, I feel like I wouldn't have even added any spice,
Okay.
which is its own problem, right? Um, so I don't think I have like a specific like, oh, like this is the spice that I use. I follow whatever in the recipe. But I also feel like, gosh, I mean, there's so many scriptural references to the spice and not losing our spice. And I think that's like the tie-in for me is like, hey, maybe it does go back to like my earlier cooking days where I wasn't adding any spice. And I think that like we can actually be moved into this space of thinking that we're doing so much and we're committed to so much, but actually be numb to daily life and actually be losing the spice day by day because we're not being present and rooted in our lives, because we're not showing up for the people around us, because we're not actually getting away with God to be like, God, what are your plans? What do you have for me? What do you want me to move on? Like, I think that that's where we get our spice from, is from the secret place. And
Oh,
then
so
we
true.
take what's in the secret place or in the kitchen or whatever metaphor you want to use, and then we bring that out into the world. And for me, like I want to follow, oh, this is coming full circle. I want to follow God's recipe. That's it. Like, I want to follow what's in his word. I want to apply that. I want to sit with him. I want to hear so clearly from him of like, here's what I need Hannah to do. Not what I need this person to do, not what I need that person on Instagram to do. Like, I want you to be aware and awake to what I have for you. And that does require clearing out the noise and getting in the secret place and like a lot of us are afraid of it. We're afraid of a secret place because we've curated our lives to be filled with so much noise. But God does not need to compete with the amount of noise that we have put into our lives willingly.
Amen. So true. So true. That reminds me of a saying we raised our kids on. They're now young adults, but we told them there's nothing you can do for God to love you more.
Mm,
He already loves you to the moon and back. You can't earn his love, but there's also nothing you can do for God to love you less. You can't lose
yeah.
his love in Christ. It doesn't matter what you do. And when you have that freedom to, yes, use the spice rack that God has given you, the recipe he's given you to, spread his flavor into the world the way only Hannah Brencher can
Yeah.
do, no one else. As my daughter likes to say, copycats are worth a lot less than originals. And
So good.
right,
So
when we
good.
try to get the approval, be like other people. If I try to be like you, I'm going to fail miserably. But you're already here. I don't need to do what you're doing. I need to do what
Mhm.
God has wired me to do. So, Hannah, as we end, what would you tell Hannah, who was in the beginning of her 1,000 unplugged hours versus Hannah? Like, what's the Hannah of today telling her? What would you maybe advise her to do differently or to expect or to look forward to?
Hmm.
How
That's a good
has
question.
how have your unplugged hours flavored your life with God, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, honestly, I feel like they have completely transformed my life with God, and it
Mhm.
wasn't something I anticipated or was even necessarily asking for. When I started unplugging, I really thought I'll be a more present person. I'll be more present with my daughter. Like, I will, and I'll get more done. I thought, like, because I'm
Mhm.
not going to be on my phone, I'm going to get more done. But I had no idea the way in which my relationship with God was going to change and evolve so much. And I wouldn't necessarily go back and tell her to do anything
Mhm.
differently because I do feel like the journeys we take to get from point A to point B are necessary. And there were a lot of things that needed to come off of me and fall off of me and take longer than I would have liked for them to take. Had I been in a different space or I knew to like look out for that roadblock or like look out for what was coming here. But I think like the biggest thing for me is just like what a gift it is to live in this space that like to me it's like I wrote about it in the book. It's like a spacious meadow, right? Like it's not I don't feel closed in. I don't feel this sense of this urgency that I used to feel all the time. And I had to dig in and I had to dig in with God to actually realize that it wasn't even necessarily the world placing all of this pressure on me. It was myself. It was the voice that like I had trained by listening to the world. And now I can tune into this better voice. And like as Henry Newman says, the voice that calls me beloved. And moving through the day feeling like you're listening to that soundtrack is a lot better than the soundtracks I was listening to before. And so yeah, it's a process. It's a daily thing. It's still something that I have to fine tune and say, you know what? Like yesterday was more plugged in than I needed to be. Here's what we're going to do differently today. But it has been such a worthwhile discipline for me to learn how to stay in the present moment and find God there.
Oh, that's so good. What you're saying, we're going to wrap up. What you're saying makes me think of the story in John 4 or 5, where Jesus, there's the adulterous woman that the Pharisees are bringing to Jesus and they want to stone her. And then there's all these voices that are accusing her to Jesus. And that reminds me of the voices in my own head, either accusing me or telling me that I'm going to miss out and that all the things that are wrong with me. And then Jesus is just there. And eventually he's the only one still there. And he says, I don't accuse you either. Like, he sees her, he loves her, he sees her for who she is, and he welcomes her. And so it's those accusing voices have no room when we are in the presence of God. And that's what you've discovered, right?
Yeah, so good.
So Hannah Brencher, thank you so much for your book, for the wisdom, for the vulnerability, for bringing us back to Jesus. And I will keep praying for little Novalee and everything that you're doing, because obviously the Lord's hand is on you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Merci. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and click that bell icon so you are the first to know when we release a new video or episode. Also, would you please consider helping us reach new people with the good news of the spice of the gospel by leaving a 5-star review for the Gospel Spice podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google, etc. Finally, share and follow us on social media to spread the word of Gospel Spice. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to tune in our podcast with new episodes every Friday. I'll see you in our next video very soon, right here. Merci.